Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Murph Codes front-end web development session, where we are attempting to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I mean, you're attempting to learn it. I already know it. I'm trying to teach it to you, and hopefully not doing too bad a job at it. Hopefully. If you caught my last session, you might have a couple of complaints. Like, for one, I didn't really cover all of the HTML tags. But, I mean, there's a lot of HTML tags. Notably missing from the session last time. We didn't discuss tables. We didn't discuss lists, ordered or unordered. We didn't tackle the video tag. We didn't tackle the canvas tag. But don't worry. All of these things, if you really need to know about them, look them up. Otherwise, we will get to most of them at some point here. Anyway, we are not nearly done anyway. So, I'm trying to introduce tags as they become useful to you. A lot of tags, really, you're not going to get a lot of benefit out of them until you have a basic understanding of CSS. Especially the div and span tags, which I mentioned last time. Do I still have those on here? Yes, here we go. This and this. They're basically standard container tags. They define, respectively, a block container, which, you know, if you remember, our block containers are like our, you know, our heading 1 and 2, our paragraph, anything that the next element in the layout is immediately on a new line, because the element we're dealing with takes up the full width of the page. Or at least the full width of whatever it's contained within. Which might not be the page, as you're about to find out. But before we get to that, what is CSS? Because that's what we're talking about today. That's what's going to make all of this seem useful. Well, CSS is a magic trick. CSS is the way in which we add style to our page. You might remember last time, we didn't have any color to our page. It was genuinely, you know, plain looking like this. However, now you can see my window's got a reddish background here. And to make things even more interesting, if I slide this out, you'll see it changes colors at various widths. Now that might not seem terribly useful, but the mechanism by which I am making that happen is very handy. Very, very handy. Because that's basically what we're going to be talking about when we're talking about responsive web development. And that is the frame of mind we need to be in when we are going about learning CSS. Because it's just easier to start with the proper philosophy than it is to try to incorporate the philosophy after we've learned all the CSS. Because there's no context without the philosophy. Okay? And what am I talking about with the philosophy of the CSS and whatnot? In modern web development, it's really inefficient to design a separate web page depending upon the device that someone is trying to use to access the content that a business or a blogger or somebody might be trying to post to the internet. With the vast number of screen sizes people can be using, with the vast number of different devices people have for accessing the content, the visual representation of that content and it appearing, elegant on all screens is vitally important. If your website looks like trash on a mobile device, you're not getting traffic. Alright? People will not come back to your site. They're very quickly going to hit that back button and see if they can find a better search result. Or they're just going to forget about going to your site ever entirely. If you have a website, chances are you are utilizing it for something. And traffic should be some kind of factor. Returning traffic is a necessity. If you have an online business, you want return customers. Okay? It's your bread and butter. If you are a content creator posting to a website, you want people to keep coming back to check in on, the new stuff you're doing. Or at least that's usually the way that works. It's hardly ever you're a one and done, and you really don't care if people ever come back or not. Now, there are tricks a lot of websites use to ensure that you return. They may encourage you to sign up for a newsletter and email you every time there's new content on the website or something. They may have an RSS feed that lets you know there's a new article or a new podcast. But the number one way in which web developers can ensure a repeat visit is through amazing user interface design. Alright, this stuff is important for your website to be both useful and, keeping people coming back. you know? So, it's worth it to get it right. So, with responsive web development, the philosophy behind this is you're designing one web page that will change its appearance enough so that, depending upon the screen size or the device used, because not every device is a screen, believe it or not, the best presentation for the content within the HTML will be served up to the user. Now, the way they achieve that with responsive web design is by adopting a mobile-first sort of a mentality with their design, meaning when you're first doing your layouts and you're, sizing your fonts and all of that, you're doing that with mobile screens in mind first. You start by making it look good on a mobile device. All right? Then from there, you add in whatever rules need to apply to make it transform as necessary to look good on a bigger screen. And the reason for that is it's much easier to scale up in screen size than it is to scale things down. Okay? If you can make it all fit on a mobile screen, it's definitely all going to fit on a big old desktop. Okay? Does that make sense? It should, because have you ever been to a website on your mobile phone and found it to just be extremely cluttered and everything is super small text and the pictures are all crammed together and whatnot? It's because they didn't plan properly for the real estate that was going to be used. The real estate being the screen. The screen is the canvas. You want to use it properly. So, what you see here with my window in a very narrow view, that's where we're going to be spending a lot of our time developing the look and feel of this website. After we've got that figured out, you're going to see a lot of this action where we're going back and forth to determine, does it still look good here and here? How about here and here? Now, I'm probably not going to have the background change color depending on the screen size. This is basically just an exercise to show you a few different breakpoints for your layout. Breakpoints are spots in which the layout of your website break down. Like it might look good in this narrow view because you've designed it for a mobile device. But it'll look good till you get to about, maybe here. And then things seem kind of stretched. Or it might look good till about here. And then it's like very, very narrow single column right in the middle of your page with a whole lot of border on either side and not a whole lot in the middle because it's just this one tiny column. That would be, kind of silly, kind of ridiculous to do. And if it's breaking here, it's definitely broken here. Okay? It's not going to get better if it already looks like trash when you get this far. It's going to look worse when you get to there. Now, thankfully, CSS allows us some flexibility in our design. Uh, Before we get into the rules and how CSS works, though, we should talk about how you add CSS to your page. Because there are a few ways that you can do it. First of all, you're not going to put your CSS in, your HTML all the time. There are ways to do it. There are 3 ways you can insert CSS. And yes, for this part, we are back in the W3 Schools reference. We have external, internal, and inline. External, we use a link to a cascading style sheet. That's what CSS stands for, cascading style sheet. That's what you see me doing here in my code. Right here. This is something we haven't talked about yet. This is a link element. It goes in the header. It has a rel attribute, which stands for relationship. And we're defining that relationship as a style sheet. Now, I have not run into any other uses for this tag other than style sheet. I'm sure they exist, but like the use cases for those are probably rather minimal. At least for our purposes and for the purposes of most of the developing I've ever had to do. Now, just like our anchor tag, when we're designing hyperlinks, we have a hyperlink reference attribute. And the value we set there is going to be the file path to our style sheet, which, as you can see from my Explorer, this is the folder we're working in. My www root is where I've got all my pages. We're going to change this up after a bit. We're going to have a specific folder for CSS, a specific folder for JavaScript, a folder just for images, stuff like that. But for now, I'm basically just dropping everything in this one singular directory. So we don't have a folder name here, we just have the file name, which is style.css, and that's this one right here. Now don't worry about what all this means. We'll break this down here in a bit, and you'll understand how this is doing what it's doing. Alright. So, the last attribute in our link tag, our link element, is a type. This isn't completely necessary, but it's usually a good idea to include it, because it tells the browser what this file is for. I don't necessarily know that your web browser uses this information, but always better to include it than not. Because the worst it's going to do is ignore it, the best it's going to do is help it along. Now you're going to see us use text/CSS in our link elements for style sheets, because that's telling our web browser this is linking to a text file. This is text in a CSS format. Alright, when we get to adding script elements, script tags, you'll see this type attribute come up again. We'll have text/JavaScript to tell the browser it's another text file, but it's containing JavaScript. Alright. So we put this in the header, the head of our document. It doesn't have to go after the meta tags, but it can. That's usually where I put it. In fact, and when we get to it, you'll see my script tags follow my CSS. And order matters to a point for some things. Specifically, the order in which... Oh, excuse me. Yawning a lot this morning. Anyway, the order in which you add your style sheets. Like, say we had multiple style sheets we wanted to apply to this page. If we had a style 1, 2, 3, depending upon the rules that we set in our style pages, 2 would override any style that conflicted that was set in 1, and 3 would override any conflicting style set in 2 or 1. So if we set a background of a different color in 1, 2, and 3, the backgrounds in 3 would override the ones in 2 and 1. And I'm talking if we just had one standard stationary background. Like, we could set it up so that there's different rules for the backgrounds. Like, in 1, only the background's up to, 400 pixel wide browser windows will display at something. And in number 2, everything between 400 and 600 will be something else. And in number 3, in which case there'd be no conflict. But if there's a conflict, like we just have background, plain and simple, and as you normally would with a web page, because you're not going to find a lot of websites that are changing their background based on screen size. Like I said, that's just an exercise to show you what breakpoints are. There'll be a bit more discussion on that in a bit. But if you set a different background style for your page, no matter what the browser window size was, you just had a single background color set for in each one of these. Because 3 is last, 3 overrides the first 2. If 3 doesn't have a rule that overrides the background rule, whatever rule you set in 2 would still override 1. There's an order. And the last one overrides all the previous ones. But that's not all. Because there are 3 ways. There's also the internal CSS and the inline CSS. Internal CSS goes between some style tags. You can throw these in your header. So between your head tags, we could also have and again, don't worry about what this part here is doing. The only thing you need to worry about is those style tags. We'll go blue. We'll keep it simple. Let me change this back. Oop. See what change that did? Look at that. Our background is now blue. And it doesn't matter what size our window is. And look, now it's multicolored again and changes with the size. Now, don't get confused. This whole color changing trick can be done with an internal style setup like this just as easily as it can be done putting it in an external file like this one. What's important here is the order of the styles as they're presented. Before, I had this linked ahead of the style, and then the style tag comes along and overwrites it because that's what comes next. That helps if I remove the second one. There we go. There we go. Alright, so again, the reason why it's just blue and no longer changes color, depending on the size of the window, has nothing to do with whether it's internal or external. It's just a matter of what order is it presented in. Okay? The later rules always override the previous rules. If I had some other rules in this style sheet, other than background color, you would still see those rules coming into effect, even though I have overridden some of the rules here. Alright, and that's the cascading effect. The cascading style sheet has a cascade effect, where you can set some rules, and then depending upon, okay, so say I have this style sheet that I want to apply to all the web pages of my site. But then on this page, I want to make just a few changes to those rules. I would just go ahead and do that after I've linked in this this style sheet. And the styles would cascade. So these rules would apply, but then these rules would make the necessary changes, sometimes overriding what was already set in previous rules. Okay? And to get it even more complicated, because we're still not done, there is also inline. How do we do that? The style attribute. Ta-da! It's now a hideous yellow. Alright, so you might be thinking to yourself, why would they make it so complicated by having so many different ways to do it? Well, as I already demonstrated previously, there is some real need for something like this, because I could have a style sheet that defines the style for the entire website. So all the pages across my whole website have a very similar style. But then I may want to change some, maybe not all, but some of those styles across one page. Or I may want to get even more specific and rather than just one page, maybe I just want to change the style for a few elements. That right there changes the style of that paragraph, which in our code looks to contain a whole lot, but really only contains those 3 links and the Hello Twitch channel text. So, you know, it's not a huge paragraph, but the background is changed. And the reason why that works is because it's the order of specificity. That's probably not the right word. That's probably not even a word. But when you're properly using the 3 different methods for inserting CSS into your HTML, the effect is you'll have a style sheet that affects the entire site, all the various pages across your site. On individuals, you may have more than one style sheet as well. But remember, order matters, okay? And you want to get specific in the order in which these things are applied. So, like, we could probably throw this down here. I don't know what kind of effect this is going to have. Doesn't really change anything. Even though it comes after our yellow paragraph, this is more specific to this one element than this is. So this is more important than that. But it really doesn't matter where you put the style tag if you're going with this method. Like, it'll still show up. You know, it'll still affect your page. Now, if we had multiple style tags, like say we had a style tag still up here, and we had the same rule, but it just, you know, it set a different property. Note how nothing changes. And the reason for that is because here we set a rule for the body, background property. Here, body, background property, blue, yellow. Background's now yellow, but our paragraph still isn't blue. I mean, if we highlight it, it turns blue, but you notice that it's not blue. Why isn't it blue, even though here I tell the style paragraph blue? Because this is still specific. This is still specific enough that it is more relevant to our element because it is in that element. See? So, there's an order to the importance. There's an order to how these rules will be applied. And we're going to stick to a very standard, kind of boring way of doing things, but we're going to stick to that way because it is the tried and true method. That will always give you predictable results, and it looks correct to your own mind, how you're seeing it. And the way we're going to do that is we are always going to follow the same order. Alright? In the head of our HTML document, we're going to link a style sheet. If we need to change anything for a page specifically, we will follow the linked style sheets with a style tag in the head. Not in the body, in the head. That's where we're going to keep our style tag. Because if we put it somewhere else, the rules that it contains will change things. If we need to change a style of an element, of a very specific element, we'll go ahead and we'll drop in a style attribute. But we are going to try to limit how much we're depending on that. Because the idea behind CSS is it keeps the HTML and the style, the formatting, separate. By having this degree of separation, that's a little hard to look at. Let me change this to... There we go. It's a little less severe. Normally, contrasting colors don't bother me that much, but I do recognize it may be bothering people trying to watch this. So, I'm trying not to be a jerk about my color coordination too much. There we go. That's a little better. It's not so contrasty that like it's gonna burn your retinas to look at it. Not like the stark yellow and stark blue we're doing. This is a little easier to tolerate. I mean, it's still probably terrible by comparison, but not quite so stark a contrast. Anyway, so we're going to try to avoid this unless we need to do it. There's a better way to do this kind of thing. I'm going to take this out. I'm going to change this to a class. Now up here, I can put this anywhere. We're going to use a dot. And here in our rules, we drop in that. No change. Doesn't look like we changed anything, though. We can even change that level of purple. There we go. So what's going on here? We're using a class attribute to apply some style. Because not only can we target specific kinds of tags, but we can target the actual specific tags of those kinds. So, like, say we have multiple paragraphs, but we only want some of them. Alright, let's reload that. As you can see, I have 3 paragraphs here now. And they're not very big paragraphs, they're only little lines. But only one of them is purple. And it's the one that has the class purple. What if I add that here? Hey, look at that. 2 of them are purple. In fact, any element that I add that class to, and I can add it to literally any element, the background will be purple. The class selector is a very handy tool in CSS. Basically, you can define a rule set that applies to whichever HTML elements you've decided you want to group together visually. Because now this second page and this and another thing, they look like they are related in a way because they have a very similar style. It's a very handy use for this class attribute. The way you set up your rules is you use that class name that you're using here, but you put a period in front of it. And that's important. Remember, class, period. Although when you're writing the rule, it's actually period, class, inside the style sheet or between the style tags. That's going to become important because you remember this ID that we said earlier? We can actually target that as well. Yeah. Okay. Bet it works better if I do this, huh? There we go. I always forget that the anchor tags aren't exactly visual. Does this still work? That still works. So what have we done here? Well, with the ID attribute, we are giving our element, in this case, our header1 element, a very specific identification. We are identifying that element. You shouldn't use an identity more than once in your HTML for a given page. It will lead to some confusion. It will lead to some issues. Your code will be invalid. Since we've called this some new file top, that's the only element that is going to be ID'd as the top of our page. Alright? If we wanted to do ID similar to top, we would have to just come up with a new name. Okay? Because you should only be using ID. Every ID'd HTML element on your page should be unique to that element, that specific element. So, like, even if I had another header1 element, I wouldn't ID that one as top as well. No, that would cause confusion in my page. Only this element right here is identified as top. Alright? And that's different than this link and this paragraph being in the purple class. Because in a class, you can have multiple elements sharing the same class, but you should only ever have a single element with each unique ID. You don't have to give every element a unique ID, but if you're going to give any element an ID, each ID should be unique. Alright, you only have to ID the elements that you want to ID. You don't have to ID every element. But every element that receives an ID attribute should have a unique value assigned to it. You're basically giving it a name that we can identify this specific element with. Now notice, in our CSS, in our style rules, the way we can identify a class is with a period. The way we can identify an ID is with a number. If you just think class period, identification number, you will remember this rule. Alright? Because when you write your classes in CSS, this is the shorthand way in which CSS defines a class, with a period first, and then the class name. Now you might see stuff like this. What does this do? This makes this class only applicable to this element that has it. So if I save that, reload my page, scroll down, you'll notice that link that is in the purple class isn't purple. This is also something you can do. What is it? Font weight. Go bold. As you're about to see, it still has that class. The text has gotten a little bolder. The text in this paragraph is also bold. Why? Because our purple class applies to all of those elements that we have identified as being in the purple class. However, the paragraph, specifically the paragraph tags that are part of that purple class, are given the background property of purple. After all, our links kind of disappear if they're still purple and the background is purple. They become a little hard to read. So, that's another possible thing that you can do. You can target specific elements within a class by including the element selector. Now, there are other different selectors that are made possible. However, getting super complicated with it really isn't going to help you. Alright? So, like, if you want to target specifically all of these sorts of elements, all of the paragraphs, all of the links, all of the, there you go. The ID selector is when you're picking one specific element, and you want to apply some rules to that. Class, when you have a few different elements, and you can get more specific by changing so that some of the elements within that class have slightly different rules, but they're still part of that class. Now, there is we'll go here. There is this selector, which just means everything on the page. Whether it's a link, a paragraph, a header, whatever. This is useful for setting universal spacing or font styles if you just want it to apply to the whole page. That's the selector you would want to use. So, font family. Let's go with something that's monospace. Now that's going to apply to everything on the page. Alright, as you can see here, we have some serif text. If I reload, that has just changed the font all across the page. Doesn't matter if it's header, doesn't matter if it's a paragraph, doesn't matter if it's a link, all of it. Whole new style. Now again, you don't have to use this specific rule with just this selector. I could change the font family for my purple backgrounds, my paragraphs with the purple background, or my purple class entirely. let's do that. Oh, let's see. We'll make these a serif one. A serif. Now, you might be looking at this going, why are there 3 different fonts here? This is a sort of a fall-through style safety check. Okay? Basically, when you set your font family, in order to ensure that you're getting the proper look that you're going for, it's best to set more than one font and just separate them out by comma. Alright? And the general rule here is very specific, within the realm of, you know, that first one. So if Times New Roman isn't available, see if any of the Times fonts are available. If none of the Times fonts are available, see if any of the serif. See if a serif font is available. The basic serif font for the system. And the general rule of thumb here is this is what you would want to do for, say, you know, if you're using a serif, if you're using a very specific font, but it's a serif font, your last one here should just be serif. If your very specific font were, say, Helvetica, which isn't a serif font, you would put sans serif at the end here. If you were using a very specific monospace font, here at the end you would put monospace, so that at least it's still in the same family of fonts. Now, what the heck is a serif, you might be thinking? The little flags. The little flags. Let me see here. No. Why am I forgetting how to do this? Ah, there we go. Okay. Okay, so this is a monospace font where every letter takes up the same amount of space. This is a serif font. You notice how the ends and corners of the letters have the weird little flag bit? Let me zoom this in. Alright, so you see how on this N there's this weird little pointy jaggedy thing that sticks off of the corner? That is a serif. Alright? So if you want these little pointy bits on your text, you're going to use a font that has serifs. And at the end of your font family declaration, in case the font you want specifically isn't there, you'll end it with serif. See? No flag, because we went with sans serif. So now it's just nice, sharp, tight corners without the weird little pointy bits sticking off of them. Now remember, this generic type and this generic type, you won't have control over what font is used. Just that it's from the sans serif or the serif or the monospace family. That's it. If you want a better level of control, that's where you get specific, followed by less specific, followed by least specific. And generally you want to keep this to 3. Alright? Unless you have a very valid reason for going with more than 3 options here. Try to just keep it around 3. Okay, otherwise you're just going to start getting confusing. But what did we change here? We have a sans serif font for everything except for our purple, paragraph, and link. So our purple class is using a serif font, while the rest of our page uses sans serif. Alright. Let me go bring this back down to something that's not so ridiculously large. Let's scooch that back. Okay, and did I not save that? Yeah, no, there's no change there. Okay. Now, y'all remember the font weight here where I made it bold? There's a couple of options here. You can go with a specific level of bold, or you can go bolder, boldest, you know, that kind of thing. Oh, let's see here. What was the other one? Ah, here we go. Let's say you want to go with italic. Now, we used to be able to do this with just a an I tag in our HTML. However, that has fallen out of favor because we now use CSS to handle styles. Now, might be confusing exactly what's going on here, but I added the font style italic to the top, which was our number 1 header. So this is our CSS. This is our HTML. Well, hello, Knitting Link. Welcome to the chat. We're just covering some CSS basics. Now, we can still use the italic tags because they do still work, but it's one of those outdated ways to do things, and at some point browsers are probably going to phase those out. When that's going to happen, who knows? It's been forever. Hey Ube, welcome. We're covering some CSS today. Settle in for some interesting discussion. We've talked a bit about class, we've talked a bit about ID, I've shown the effects of how we can use CSS to style for various breakpoints, because the philosophy we're going to be enforcing from day one, responsive web design. Because I don't want to teach everybody a whole bunch of CSS and be like, okay, now that you know how all of that works, now let's learn how to do it properly. No, we're just going to start by doing it properly from day one. Sort of. I mean, half the stuff I'm doing here looks absolutely ridiculous anyway, as you can see. So anyway, we're about an hour in. We have covered that stuff. Let me take this out. So we can see the effects of all of this at once. Alright. So, an example of how we can change our layout based on the size of our user's web browser. Classes, element-specific classes, ID, the universal selector for style to style everything on the page. We've kind of handled a lot all in one big shot. So, we've also handled linking a style sheet in, incorporating a style tag in your header, and we had an element with a style attribute, but we took that out in favor of using a class. Because in my part, that's, you know. Yes, the @media part of our rules here are what handles the resizing. We haven't quite talked about that yet. We've demonstrated it, but we haven't talked about it. And that's actually a good segue into talking about that. So we're going to talk about that now. Because why not? What better time than now? Now that we have a basic idea of some of this stuff, how we can add and change some rules for our CSS, how the cascading works, this right here is how we're handling changing stuff based on breakpoints. And like I said, breakpoints is the different sizes of web browsers that'll make your layout break, essentially. Now, it is entirely up to you which breakpoints you want to handle. I don't recommend handling all of them, like I have here, because it gets a bit much. Usually, what I recommend is either have your web page designed for mobile, and then set a breakpoint for desktop. Yeah, definitely don't do a different background per pixel. You're definitely going to drive people nuts if you resize the window that way. But what you want to be doing is you want to be designing for mobile first. So, before you even have any of these media rules, like, let me show you what happens if I take this rule out. And we just go with basic body is crimson. You're going to notice nothing changed. It still does the same thing. Why does it do the same thing? Because technically, this rule applies until one of these other rules applies. Okay? So that's how we're going to implement our mobile first design. All right, before we concern ourselves with at what size we need to change things, we're going to set our very basic layout rules here at the top. And we're not going to have a media query to differentiate these rules from any of the others. We will overwrite these rules within our media queries later. And that's what this is. This is a media query. We'll talk a bit more about what that does here in a bit. But first, let's look at our page here. What kind of styles do we want to take out? You know, we'll take all of this from our style tag here. We're going to put that right here. However, I'm going to change the order of this because when I do my style rules, I like to go with the least specific to the more specific. Okay? So, the everything selector is the least specific thing you can set up. So, usually that's going to go first. Body is still pretty unspecific. It's just the whole document. What's the difference between this and this? Well, there's some stuff you can isolate from the body. This will still apply. Because this is just the whole darn page. This only applies to the elements that are in the body. Yeah, the asterisk, I didn't learn about that one when I first learned about CSS. In fact, a lot of the time, what I've seen is courses will ignore the asterisk and just put those rules in the body. For most things, it's not going to make much difference. There are some weird, funky things, though, where it is going to make a difference. It's kind of strange where it's going to make any kind of difference. It might also be something that's changed recently. I don't quite recall, but if I remember right, font size is one of those that gets affected here. Oh, it certainly does save you a lot of rows of code, because you don't have to add the same thing. Or have to worry about where you've nested something, if it's within the right element that the rule you're hoping for will get applied. So, it's definitely good to start your CSS page with that. And then follow it with body, any other tag specific styling, then your classes, and then your IDs. And then you get to start your @media query. Now, I don't want a different breakpoint here and here and here and here and here and there. Because that's a lot of breakpoints. That means I have to set rules for each one of those. That's going to make a difference. So let's establish a rule here. Okay? We know that this is our mobile layout. I think we'll get away with our mobile layout till about somewhere in here. Probably here. So what's our dark olive green? We can get rid of that one. What happened here? Why is it still showing dark olive? Did I break something? I broke something, I bet. Because it shouldn't be showing green at all. Because this is our style page. Actually, put that down here. So you're asking that same question I am, because here's the thing. We're now looking at the second HTML page, which I linked the style sheet in the same way as the first one, but it's this style sheet, this one right here, which has no olive green in it. There is no olive green here. Why then is the second page showing olive green? It should not. It should not show olive green at all. There is no olive green. What is going on? We removed that rule. It's not there anymore. There shouldn't be a breakpoint here anymore. Ah! Our browser was hanging on to the old style page. I had to specifically go in and tell it to refresh. So now we no longer have that ugly dark olive green. I mean, we still don't really want all these breakpoints, but at least one less is better than nothing. And the first one goes to about here, which is great. Our second one I'll probably put somewhere around here. And then the last one will extend all the way out, no matter what the size is. I'm usually a fan of doing like a mobile, tablet, desktop sort of descending order. So that if you do, on the rare occasion, have somebody hopping in on a medium-sized screen, such as a tablet, the layout is somewhere between desktop layout and mobile phone layout. Because mobile phone, very basic, single column, element, 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 element from top to bottom. Desktop, you're going to have elements kind of everywhere, and that middle screen, you can get away with some of that, but you want it a bit more simplified. So, I do like having that middle ground. Although, you can easily get away with having your mobile design, your mobile layout, load on those tablet devices usually, and people are fine with it. I'm glad to hear that the birthday party went well. That's good news. I got a relative who's been dealing with some, let's see, which one is this? Green? Light green? We'll get rid of those two. And we'll get rid of that one. Okay. Expected. No, okay. Weird. Ah. I have to change the rule here. That's got to go to 439. There we go. Better. And at least it didn't do that weird, crazy thing where it hung on to the style sheet long after we updated it. Alright, so. I'm still just using background to emphasize where those breakpoints are, because we don't really have a lot to work with on this page just yet as far as actual elements for our layout. But we'll get to that. We will get to that. Also, this is a fairly garbage-looking page. No lie, there's really not much on here, just a bunch of blank whatever. So, let us make some changes to some things so that we're doing this properly. Alright? I want to be doing this the way we should be doing this. Alright, now, nearer to the start of this, I usually, as I said, I usually have some folders for various resources for my page. There's usually a CSS folder for the Cascade style sheets. There's usually a JS folder for the JavaScript source code. There's usually a folder for the images, which I already have here. But so far we've been using mostly just dropping everything in this same directory. Let's start doing this properly, as though this were an actual project. What did I do here? That's not what I wanted. Why is this combined? Because it threw that in there. That's why it's combined. Okay. There we go. Now I want to move this into here. Move it. There we go. Alright. Now, because I moved the style sheet, in order to not upset my page, I do need to include the folder name. Alright, this is again using relative file path names. Just like we discussed here with the links, if I had been trying to access a folder on a different domain, I'd have to do the whole http://www.somedomainname.com/folder name. Since this folder exists on my domain and is in the same folder as my index file, I can just put the folder name / file name, since this file is in this folder. And that's how that works. No change, still works. Brief review. Now, I am going to want to do that on all of my pages, though, because that's where that file just lives now. Now, there is a way that we'd be able to update that in one spot, and it would apply to all of our pages, but that would require some PHP, and we're not there yet. That is server-side development, which we'll get into at some point after front-end development. So we got that. Now if we go to our second page, just like our first page, our second page should have the same styles applied to it, and it does. Should still do that thing where the background changes when we change the size, and it does. That is the magic of the cascading style sheet linked as an external file. Same style sheet, several pages. Or, in this case, 2. No, that's not where I want that. There we go. So normally I just have these created in the file editor, or in the file explorer rather than messing around with creating folders in my editor, because I believe in doing certain tasks in their proper place, and I don't feel like a text editor is where I should be creating folders. You can. It is a thing you can do, but it's not usually a thing that I'm trying to do. Alright. So, we have our CSS in its own little folder. So we have some organization here. I am going to remove that for now. Don't worry, we'll get back to that and talking about that later. But this is generally the structure we're going for here with our page. The actual page is here, style sheets in a folder in that same directory, label with, proper labels. JavaScript code will go here, images in their own folder. There we go. When we have PHP files, parts of those are going to go into theirs. VS Code. I don't use Atom. I know a lot of people swear by it, but I use VS Code. It does the job. Does exactly what I need. I don't usually go in for the whole code editor debate because Atom versus VS Code is silly to me. Because this is what I originally used. Basic Notepad. This is the text editor I used to learn HTML and JavaScript. So, I do also have Notepad++. I've got some experience with that. I do like that as an editor, Notepad++. In fact, I like throwing that one on a thumb drive. And then if I ever have to go do a job somewhere where I need to edit some configuration files or something, I know I have an editor that I'm familiar with, and I'm not stuck with just basic Notepad. Welcome to the chat, Lava Lamp. And yes, a lot of BR. I'm not using Lipsum text here because I just needed space. I just needed to make this a scrolling page for something that we did earlier. But don't worry, we're getting into actual, regular development here, not the experimental garbage here in a bit. But Notepad++, I do throw that on a thumb drive. It's got the portable version, and it comes in handy because, sure, you technically could run VS Code or Atom from a portable drive, but I just feel like Notepad++ does its portable version a little bit better. CSS, HTML, and JavaScript I do in Visual Studio Code. Python, usually I'm still using idle, despite the fact that I could do that in VS Code. I prefer the degree of separation, though. Just kind of giving each kind of code that I write its own environment is a visual reminder to me that, hey, you're doing Python now. Remember the syntax for Python. And it makes it easier than jumping back and forth between languages. But front-end development, VS Code. All the way. Not because of any specific advantages VS Code has to other text editors out there. In my opinion, basically whatever works for you works for you. If you like Atom, use Atom. If you like VS Code, use VS Code. If you like, you know, writing your code in smoke signals and having a translator 3 hills over, jotting it down with a pen and paper, by all means, do that. The most important thing isn't which editor you're using, it's that you're actually getting your code written. All of these editors will have tools available to help you write your code better. Line numbers, context, color coordinating, and whatnot. All of that's basic, standard. Auto completion of tags and stuff. It definitely is just a matter of taste. But all of the editors have the same basic tool set. It's just one's UI will be a little bit better than the other, in your opinion. And whichever one you want to use that. I can't recommend making writing code more difficult for yourself. So if if writing your code in Notepad is what makes you the most comfortable, write your code in Notepad. You're not going to have the fancy highlighting. You're not going to have the autocomplete. You're not going to have, the other things. Well, hey, thanks for dropping in, Knitting Link. Feel free to join us next time. Tomorrow we've got, Super Metroid, and then Friday, more Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I expect you'll probably want to join us for that one, at least. But, all of them, they're just text editors. VS Code, Atom, Code Blocks, PyCharm. You can write your CSS and your JavaScript and your HTML let me see here. I can write my HTML using idle. I could use my Python editor for my web development. Do I? No. And the reason why I don't is because I don't get the highlighting and text completion that I benefit from with, an editor that's actually designed for code work, more so than just Python. Because this one is specific to Python. It's still just a text editor. You still write text, it'll still save text. Exactly. The color-coded editors, like VS Code here, does make it easier. Because you know right away if you've missed something. Because it'll be the wrong color. Things will show up strange and you're immediately going to pick up on, I missed something. I missed a bracket, or I missed a semicolon. Not always, but sometimes. A lot of the time. You're going to realize you've missed something. Here, you will not benefit from that. You can still get your line numbers. it will still save it as the format you tell it to save it in, and it will still work. And as long as it works, perfectly acceptable way to do things, but don't make things harder on yourself. Find yourself an editor you like. Find one that you're going to use. Find one that doesn't become such a daunting tool in and of itself that you are actually repelled from working on code, because you just can't handle the monolithic, user interface of your editor. That's the problem a lot of people run into when they mistakenly download Visual Studio instead of Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio is meant for like Visual Basic or I forget which one is the C++ that's Microsoft specific. But it's like their .NET or something. They have their own flavor of C++. I just can't remember what it is. Objective-C, or is that Windows? I don't remember. Anyway, regular old Visual Studio is meant for and designed for those developers that are working in those particular contexts, and the tool set is different. Can you design a web page with Visual Studio? Absolutely. But it's going to probably be an intimidating experience if you're new to the whole thing. Because just getting it configured to be able to do this, where you're just writing out your code and it's giving you the proper highlighting and whatnot, it's a bit of a task, That said, though, it does have some nice tools to help you if you can figure out how to enable them and how to use them properly. But Visual Studio Code here, and Atom, and heck, even code blocks, Notepad++, Android Web Developer. That's the app that I use on my phone. I don't even know if that one's available anymore. I bought it like, I don't know, 7-8 years ago on my phone. I'm sure there's better ones that have come along, but like, I'm not gonna be bothered to switch. It's a text editor. As long as it does the highlighting and stuff that I need, I'm fine. I'm not gonna bother with that. Point is, your editor of choice should just be something you know how to use, something you're comfortable using, and makes it easy for you to code. Has the features you're looking for. Beyond that, it's basically just brand loyalty. And, if that's the sort of thing you go in for, great, good for you. I'm not too concerned with it. Other tutorials I've seen will tell you, oh, you should use this. We're going to be using this, so that's what you should use. This is what I prefer, so that's what you should use. I don't care if you're using Visual Studio Code. What I can say, though, is if you're using Atom and you have a problem with Atom, I'm probably not going to be able to help you because I don't use Atom. And it's not, oh, I won't be able to help you at all. No, I won't be able to help you configure your code editor. I can help you with your actual code, but I'm not going to be able to help you if it's a problem with your code editor that you're running into. Not familiar with Go Code Edit, but I also don't have an iPhone. I have an Android device, and there's a whole different set of code editors from one to the other. There are some that are available on both, but like the one that I do use is specific to Android. It's literally Android web developer. Um, so it's pretty specific to Android. I would be very surprised if they released it on iPhone. It would probably just be a very basic port that's, you know, I mean, it's still just a text editor, so, like, they could port it to iPhone, I guess, but, like, what would be the point? you know? Anyway, not to get too bogged down in editor talk, because believe me, that is a subject that people can get on, and they will be on it forever. Forever. I used to do a lot of work with the Facebook group Free Code Camp Earth. I was a moderator there. I was also a content writer. I would come up with weekly posts to keep people motivated, but also like inform them of various things. The text editor debate was always a big one. Like, there was always, hey, what text editor is the best? There's no answer to that question. Because the actual answer to that question isn't going to be the name of some software. It's going to be, which one do you like? Just like, which computer is the best one to use to code? The one that turns on and that you're sitting at typing code. That's the best one to use. Any computer can be used to write code because that's what they're for. Any computer. I don't care if you have a laptop from the 1980s and that's all you can afford. If that's all you got, you can still write code. Sure, your machine is probably going to hinder your ability to produce code quickly, unless you're very comfortable with the fact that it is an ancient, slow machine. But, like, I'm not going to recommend you go out and get the latest, HP or Asus or whatever is available and, top of the line, souped up whatever, because you don't need to. There is no, on the market today, this is the best laptop to use for code work. That's not how it works. Any computer will write code. Any computer is perfectly capable of being a text editor, because that is the most basic function of a computer. Since those, single color monitors that we had back in elementary school, and fellow old fogies are going to remember this, the ones we played Oregon Trail on, those computers were perfectly legit for writing code. Still are. I have old pieces of junk like that lying around here in my laboratory. I still play on them. I have a virtual machine on this system that runs DOS with a QBasic editor. One of my favorite toys. You know how old that is? I was probably 8 when that came out. But I still love playing around on it. Everything is command line. It's amazing. Some of you probably felt your butthole pucker when I said command line because, y'all aren't familiar with command line, or you get intimidated by the big black box with just text and no visuals, and heck, your mouse has no effect here. Every computer is a text editor. It's the most basic function they've had since the beginning of home computers. We've come a long way, adding more functionality, adding other stuff. Well, if you're a Linux head, of course you're going to use command line. I mean, all the good stuff is on command line. That's just, you know. But I grew up with DOS, and I grew up using the command line in DOS. I switched over to Linux later in life. In fact, I didn't really get into Linux until probably college. Might have been after college. Yeah, I think I made my first Linux box. Oh, let's see. I think it was after my kid was born, actually. So I would have been in my late 20s. I got into DOS way early, but that was because the first system that my parents owned was a DOS box. It was a basic IBM. I can't even remember what processor it had, but you know, it was before Pentiums were a thing. My first personal computer, I think, if I remember right, had a Pentium. Not a Pentium 2, just a Pentium. And that had Windows. But my parents' first computer, the one that I first got to start playing around on, it had DOS, and then it had the DOS command interface, which was this predecessor to Windows. And then they had, after the DOS command, they had Windows, and I think we had Windows 3.1 as our first graphic user interface. I don't think we ever had 3.0. I think we just had 3.1 as our first. But that first computer, it didn't even have Windows. That was a thing we had to install later. And that was basically a thing. My folks had the computer, and I don't know, a friend of theirs was like, "Have you tried this Windows thing?" And they're like, "No, what's that?" And so they bought an installation disk, which was, if I remember right, still the big flat black floppies, and I mean the big ones, not the ones modern save icons are modeled after, but like the old 80s flat black ones. If you go watch War Games, you may have an idea of what I'm talking about. But I remember playing Oregon Trail off of those, Number Munchers, the original Duke Nukem that I played. Yeah, the 3.25 inch. Yeah, the very, very flat, very flimsy floppy disk. In fact, it's where the term floppy comes from, because they were very flexible. But, yeah, those got replaced by the 3 1/4s. I believe it was 3 1/4s, or were those 3 1/2? I can't remember. But the ones that the modern save icon is modeled after were actually the next one. But yeah. Anyway, we are way off topic here. We're supposed to be talking about CSS, and here we are talking about ancient technology that is never coming back, much as we wish it would. Because, honestly, That sounds right. 3.5, and then 5.25. Yeah, the 5.25 came first. I had a good library of games on the 5.25, and then the 3.5s came after that. Oh, you had a Commodore 128D? See, I never got into those. I kind of wish I had, but I missed the boat on those. Um, I have been looking at picking up a Commodore 64 as just kind of a retro machine to play around with. But it's one of those things, it's on the wish list. No, we're not talking about Breath of the Wild, Knitting Link. I know you wish we were. We're talking about actual, like, technology from back when we were kids, when, you know, screens were in green and black, and that was it. Color was basically your choice of orange or green. And most people didn't get orange. But, yeah. My first journey into code that I can distinctly recall actually took place in elementary school. How long have I been programming? Like actually seriously been programming where I grasp it, 6th grade. That's when I learned HTML and JavaScript and got interested in BASIC. But my first experience coding actually took place in elementary school, probably 1st or 2nd grade. There was a computer lab where we'd go to learn, you know, like computer games that taught us math and stuff, but also, yeah, you guys have a great one, Knitting Link and Ube. Great having you hang out. Don't forget, Super Metroid tomorrow, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on Friday. We'll see you then. But yeah, my first experience coding, from what I recall, we were messing around on the computer lab's Apple IIs. I can't remember exactly what language it was, but it had the turtle drawing module. It's not Python, because Python hadn't been invented yet, but that turtle module was actually based on previous something previous, and that's what I was first exposed to. But it wasn't until 6th grade really got into video games and wanting to be able to make my own video games. That's when I started looking at what classes and resources were available for me to learn that stuff. There wasn't anything until after 6th grade, and that was when the local community college had a 2-week summer program for the high school kids to be able to take a class teaching, you know, just random stuff, pottery, theater, creative writing. One of the classes they taught was web development. So that's what I took. That's where I got my first exposure to HTML and JavaScript. That's also where Drunk Furball comes from, because that's where I came up with the username. We needed a username our first day to come up with a unique screen name for our email account to be able to set up our little web hosting That was back in the days of GeoCities and Angel Fire. Uh, Real amazing stuff happened back then. Let me tell you. Um, I didn't want to have a name that had a bunch of numbers in it, and I didn't want a name that was just my name. I wanted something that was unique, something that could be remembered, and something that probably wasn't going to be taken. And I settled on Drunk Furball. Been using it ever since, been coding ever since. Um, Off and on, though. I've had, like, retail jobs and stuff, and I spent some time as a trucker, spent some time as a photographer, bounced around to a couple other things. Now, I'm trying to study to be a magician and hypnotherapist, but I still do a lot of code work. Mostly for myself, mostly making games and stuff, but I know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, I know um, Python, um, I know a bit of C and C++. I don't do a lot with that, so I do often have to refresh my memory when I launch back into one of those development projects. But I've done a little bit with Ruby, PHP. Um, yeah, you name it. I've tried to expose myself to it, code-wise, because programming's always fascinated me. Um, I'm not a professional developer in that I'm getting paid for any kind of work doing this kind of thing right now, but I do keep my skills up to date. And because I want to... Oh, how long does it take? Not very long. This is the second tutorial session that I've done on front-end development, and we're already on CSS. We haven't fully covered CSS yet. We're probably going to be wrapping up here sometime in the next hour. Just because I have to go get some lunch. I'm going to need to eat something today. But the previous session was just very basic HTML. It's where we covered most of what you're seeing on the screen here. A lot of this is just garbage, though. Um, the main things you need to know: doc type at the head of your page, very first thing. It's technically not HTML, it just tells the browser that it's HTML. Then you have some HTML tags, open and close. Excuse me. Between those, you have your header tags, open and close, your body tag, open and close. Header is for all the metadata for your page. Body is for all the actual content. If you're going to write valid code, be sure to set a character set. If you're going to do much with CSS, and I imagine you will, you're going to want to set the viewport. You're going to want to title your page. If you're hoping to get any kind of result with search engines, you're going to want keywords in a description. This is the tag you need to link your style page, assuming your style page is in a CSS folder and labeled style CSS. You can also put style between some style tags. JavaScript we'll get to when we get to it, but that's the JavaScript tag. If you're going to do external JavaScript files, you can attach them similar to the way we've attached it with this this link, except you're going to use a script tag and you're just going to set a source attribute with path name. But we'll get to that when we get to JavaScript. That'll probably be 2 sessions away. Anyway, in the body, you're going to set your elements for layout. You're going to set your elements for paragraphs, headings. Don't do this with the millions of BR. That's break and return. I did that because I needed some space between my header and my actual page content so that it would actually scroll, because I wanted to demonstrate something else here. I gave the... You know, I've always wondered, does this work without the... I bet it does. Yeah, there we go. Still works. Alright, if you ID something, you can actually link directly to it with the hashtag in your hyperlink. The A actually stands for anchor. The attribute href is your hyperlink reference. This is how you handle in-page navigation. You have an ID somewhere, and you put a hashtag and that ID name, and it'll jump to that part of the page when you click that link. You can also use that same technique to jump to other parts of a page. For example, here, second page, we click that link. I see you took a shortcut. If we actually look at our second page, it's just a bunch of BR, but then way down at the bottom, we've labeled an element as the bottom, and our link has that hashtag bottom to send us right to the bottom. If we want to navigate to a page that is not within the domain of our own web server, not on our own, directory here, we have to use the full file name or the full domain name to get there. If we want that to open in a new tab, we throw a target equals _blank. That's to tell the web browser open that in a new tab. Don't overuse that. Just use it for when navigating people away from your page. If you're linking to something that's not on your page, throw that in your links, in your link tag. For CSS, a couple ways to do it. The external style sheet, which is a separate file that contains your rules. But you can also do style rules here. You're using Free Code Camp. I'm familiar with Free Code Camp. In fact, I still have a profile on Free Code Camp. It has been a while since I've been over there, though. But I used to be a moderator for their Free Code Camp Earth page. Their tutorials are pretty handy. I have gone through most of their course. That's not where I learned. That's just one of the places where I check in occasionally to refresh my knowledge, because, like any skill, you're gonna wanna keep practicing and staying on top of it to get really good at it. It's not like riding a bike where once you've learned it, that's it. Particularly since HTML changes over time. When I originally learned HTML, CSS did not exist. All of this stuff wasn't even a thing. People didn't even know about this. All of our style came from what we did in here. And it was horrible. Code was very cluttered, very garbage looking. If you wanted to change a style of something, you would have to change it on every single page. Web development was very tedious. Now, if I want to change the background on all of my pages, I just change the background on all of my pages. Let's go with... Burleywood. Sure, why not? There we go. Both my pages. Easily able to change the background color. And I only had to change one word. So, you know, that was not a thing that was possible when I first learned HTML. So, learning HTML, it's a thing you never stop doing, but you will reach a point where you're good enough that you could do it professionally. You could do it, you know, as a job. And as long as you stay on top of it, keep practicing, keep learning, you can continue to get employed using this skill. Only reason I'm not doing web development professionally is because I prefer not to. Lifestyle and family factors and whatnot pretty much keep me at home. I do occasionally take on a freelance project here and there. Mostly, though, I write code for myself. As a magician, some of the projects that I work on using my code is just taking the weird little puzzles and effects that I've been studying, and I make myself neat little web page things. In fact, I have a whole page of that. This is also a very old page that I did way back in the day. Still proclaims that I'm on Free Code Camp. It's probably been a few years, though. But, like, this one right here. This is a web page that is that is designed to aid in a magic trick. This is a very good magic trick, by the way, and highly recommend that you pull this one on a friend, especially if you have a smartphone. You can pull this web page up on your phone, because the phone is part of the trick. You're gonna fan out the cards. You're gonna have a volunteer pick a card, and you're gonna be like, okay, you can show me the card because I'm not the one who's gonna reveal it. You know the card, I know the card, but there's also someone else who knows the card, someone you would never suspect. It's the government, or it's, Professor Insano, or whatever. And then you're going to call up your confederate, your assistant, and let's say the card was, Ace of Spades. On your phone, before you call them up, you're going to hit Ace of Spades real quick, without the volunteer, of course, seeing. And that's going to give you a name. You're going to call up your buddy. You're going to be like, hello, is Professor Insano there? Now notice I just kind of casually slipped that in, but made it seem like I messed up. Now, the person who picks up the phone is going to hear you say that. They're going to type in... They're going to type in the name. They're going to hit the reveal, and it's going to tell them Ace of Spades. Because they're going to look at this same page. They won't see the exact same page you're seeing because, like, it's a little decoder ring kind of thing. But they'll type in the name, you misspoke, and using some JavaScript here, it'll tell you which one. 5 of Hearts, Gary. Five of Hearts. Now, the effect here is you have a volunteer pick a card. They don't think that there's somebody you're going to call who's not present who could possibly know what the card is. But you put that person on speakerphone and they're like, your card is the 5 of Hearts, and it totally blows their mind because how do they know? They're not here. They didn't hear you tell them. They can check your text messages, and they won't see you texting them saying, oh, it's the 5 of Hearts, or anything like that. If you pull this up in a private tab on your browser, and then you close that private tab, there's no way for them to know that there's a website you go to that decodes that mistakenly spoken name into a card that your assistant reveals over the phone. So, with a little bit of theatrics, you can make it seem as though you have got a psychic on the line who's able to pick the card that the volunteer chose. Let's see here. This is another one. I don't exactly remember how this trick works fully because it's been a while since I've done this one. Alright, so the cards are randomized every time. You can refresh this every time and you'll see the cards are genuinely random. Pick any set. We'll go with the 5 of clubs, 5 of diamonds. Five of clubs is an A, 5 of diamonds, D. Ta-da! It knew. Even though, like, we picked 2 groups of 5 cards, it still knew. You can do this with an actual deck of cards, by the way. And if you just do a search for Metis, Nomum, Deaded, Css, spelled exactly like that, there are videos on the internet that'll reveal the method for doing this without a computer. But, the way this one works is the computer tells you what your cards are. I've also got a fun little video poker program that I've made. This one's kind of fun. Let's see if we can go for a straight. I just need a 6. Oh, bummer. Oh, we got a pair of pairs. Or we got 2 pair. There we go. Hooray! Not the greatest user interface, obviously, but fun little video poker game. I've also got this chess collaboration that I set this up when I was a moderator for that free code camp group as a thing for other members of the group to help collaborate on, so that they could get their first experience with an open source project working with other people. Didn't have a whole lot of takers on it, but the basic like functionality of the chessboard is me. This part where you're able to select the pieces and move them, though, with the clicking of the mouse, that is the work of a fellow code camper. Because with mine, where I finished off, where I made it a... Let's see, where's tools? Here we go. I made it so that you would have to type the moves that you were going to make here. And I did that on purpose. I wanted an incomplete project, so that if anyone in the Free Code Camp Earth group was looking for an open source project to contribute to, they could just come here, and it's a half-completed project with a whole lot of work that could still be done to it, and they could basically pick whatever they felt like contributing and just add to it. Because nobody's going to want to play chess this way, where you have to type in the moves right here. Whoop. But I got a help document here so that, you can see how to play it, but you can also see where the shortcomings are. It doesn't work in all browsers, particularly mobile. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. But what was done is, this is a working chessboard that adheres to all the rules of chess. Okay? White moves first. All the pieces are in their proper starting position. They can only move to places that are legal moves. I think I even have a rule where you can't move... Oh no, you can move into check. But now the game is done. Once a king is captured, you can't move any more pieces. So, I still haven't implemented, checking if a move will put your king in check. Or, if a move is an invalid move for the king to make because you'll be moving your king into check. So I did leave a little bit out of there, but it does things like castling. I believe there's even that weird little move where if you have two pawns on the fourth line, like you could do a little sidestep action and capture an adjacent pawn. It's a very, very obscure but legal move in chess, and I have it all programmed into here. It is... Yeah, I still need to have detecting if the king goes into check. But I feel like it handles chess very very elegantly. Like that's all the code there is to it. It's not super fancy or anything. Anyway, getting off topic here. We're supposed to be talking about CSS. So, it is a lot of work, but you get better at it with practice and with proper notation, proper commenting, proper documentation, being able to work on an extensive project for, long periods of time gets easier because you'll remember what you have to do. You'll remember where you were the last time you picked it up. You can take a break from it and come back to it and know what still needs to be done. You only pick up that kind of skill, though, from practice. Lots and lots of practice. It's definitely worth adhering to the advice that you probably get a million times over, especially if you're working in the free code camp environment of practice, 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 and more practice. All the practice. Practice as often and as much as you can, whenever you can. Practice obsessively. Like, they really hammer home the whole idea of practice, practice, practice. And honestly, yeah. I mean, if you're going to get good at it, if you want to get good at it quickly, practice. Practice as much as you can. If time's not so much of a factor, you're still going to want to practice, but you don't have to spend all of your time practicing. You can go do other things with your life, essentially. My objective with this tutorial is going to be to take people from, I don't know anything about web development, to I can make my own game in JavaScript. And then I hope to be able to make a game with people who have joined in on following my tutorials. Or at least, have other people jumping in the chat being able to contribute to the work. Don't know when we're going to get to that part, but it's probably going to be a ways down the road because we're still working on learning CSS here. And actually, I think, yeah, we're already at noon, so I think I'm going to wrap up today's stream. And next time, I'm going to be talking about doing layouts, like actual proper layout etiquette. Because what we've got here is just basic. Here's how to, identify some breakpoints. Here's how you can use CSS to target various elements, change various things on your page. We have the foundation of knowledge to make our CSS work. But we have yet to see its true power and how to make it work properly. And for that, we're going to want to make an actual page with a real layout. And, yeah, we're going to do all that next time. We're going to ditch these random, crazy experiment garbage pages that I've been making. So, say goodbye to index and second page. And our random styles here, because we're going to start over next time. But this has all been throwaway code so far. We will have we'll have ourselves some really good ideas for a genuine layout. And I'll show you how to set all that up and how to set it up with responsive web design in mind so that right from the beginning you're implementing the proper philosophy to your design, making sure that you're following all of the correct rules right out the gate without having to go back and redesign your entire page from the ground up because, you know, oh, in order to use the rule that you want to be able to use, you have to do all these other things first, that kind of garbage. We're going to do it proper. We're going to do a proper web page. What else have I got coming up on my channel here? As I told Knitting Link and Ube before they took off, tomorrow we are back to playing Super Metroid on the Nintendo Switch online service. That's as part of our Metroid franchise playthrough. We're trying to play through the entire Metroid franchise. You got a webpage, Mountain Eagle? Go ahead. You won't be able to drop a link in the chat, though. Do you have it linked to your free code camp? By any chance? Testingwebdesign.com. Did you buy a domain name? Your hamburger menu doesn't seem to do much. Yeah, there's not a whole lot here, but you do have some things working for you so far. I would suggest working on these breakpoints here. Because you can see how when I size the page, you have your menu next to your title. But then when I size it down, it kind of collapses your title until it gets to the mobile design. I suggest, like, on the full widescreen, like, this is okay. Having your menu next to your title, that's okay. You're not breaking any rules there. But when it gets to about here, I would recommend dropping this down instead of allowing this to break. Okay? How you solve that is you're going to want to find this element, and in your style sheet, you're going to want to declare a minimum width. Okay? And that'll keep it from shrinking past this point. What it should do after that is it should kick this down because there's no more room. It might start collapsing your menu, though. But I notice your menu stays pretty solid and doesn't collapse down. So it should just drop down to the next line. In theory, if it doesn't work out that way, you might have to look up a solution that will work for you. But you got your you got a pretty decent header here. That works pretty nicely. having the logo resize and having your menu collapse into the hamburger icon. That works pretty nicely. You do want to make your hamburger icon active, though, so that when people click on it, it actually comes up with a menu. But if you're not yet to JavaScript or jQuery, you won't have that figured out just yet. So, like, if you're not that far, totally understandable. But yeah, not bad. Not bad. Be interesting to see where you go from here. Oh no, JavaScript and Java are two different things. Don't get them confused. Java is its own like full-featured programming language for designing actual desktop apps. JavaScript, while it sounds like it's named for Java, they were basically just riding on the hype of Java because Java was the new language that everybody was into at the time. And when they designed JavaScript, they made it look similar to Java and used a lot of the same syntax, but it's a completely unrelated language invented by people who just unfortunately chose to, name it after the new popular language on the block at the time. You're going to want to make sure that when you're on like the forums and whatnot, you're making that you're making the distinction clear that you mean JavaScript and not Java, because two different languages, you'll get two different answers. All right. So yeah, it gets if you need to shorten JavaScript, go with JS. Never call it Java though. Never call it Java. Java's a totally different animal. But yeah, your page looks good. It can use some improvement, obviously, but you're starting out. So this is actually very good for someone who's just getting started. I mean, you've seen my page. It did not save the address. There it is. Now my page, not so, like, I don't have a whole lot going on for the responsive web design. But that's because the layout really doesn't change a whole lot from, mobile to wide. Like, it's just the same. It's a column of text. It just spans the full width. I could probably do better, but I'm not really working on that. I'm usually working on this one, which is actually my WordPress site. I'm not a fan of the layout, though. I've really got to do something better. But this is just a blog, so I'm not terribly concerned with that one. But I also have my professional site, which I'm just getting started with. I'm not doing a whole lot with this yet, but that's because I'm also not, like, professionally available as any of these things. But when I do become available for hire as a magician or a hypnotist or even a web developer, this will be the site that'll be on my business cards that people can go to with information on how to contact me and the services. What you're seeing right here is just a placeholder, but I do have a link to drunkfurball.com, which is my blog, and that other page with my repositories from my time at freecodecamp.org. So, I've done a bit of, bit of projects with Free Code Camp. I've also done a bit of projects freelance. Uh, if you're hoping to make a go of it as a freelance coder, my advice to you is once you've got your skills up and you feel like you're in a place where you can take somebody else's ideas and apply them to a page and make it look the way that they want it to look, go around and introduce yourself to small businesses and churches. Visit functions that are open to the public, and don't be annoying about it. But when you introduce yourself, if you have business cards, give them a business card, that has your web page on it, and just mention, hey, I make websites. Let me know if you need one. Don't hound them. Don't be annoying. Once you got your name out there, they know that you're local. They've seen your face. They realize, hey, I can hire this guy, and he's right in my own backyard, rather than trying to deal with some, company that you never actually see anybody. They just call you up on the phone and promise you all this amazing stuff and then maybe deliver on half of it. They'll know you personally. That'll get you some business. It really will. I used to design business sites for my mom's friends. My mom had her own small business. I designed her site. Friends of hers who were also small business owners would contact me and, hey, let me get a page. Let me have you set me up with something. So I'd do that. Decent work, and usually people will prefer to work with someone who's local rather than some big company that they have to, they can only get on the phone or deal with over email or something, A lot of the smaller businesses prefer to talk to somebody face to face, make their business deals over coffee, that kind of thing. Just make sure you know what you can promise and deliver on. Alright, don't overshoot it. If you don't know back-end development, make sure you understand what's possible within your skill set. If it's something you haven't actually pulled off, don't promise it. Unless you plan on doing a hell of a lot of reading. But, yeah. So, we've covered some pretty basic CSS here. And as I said, next time we're going to do a full web page with genuine layout. We'll do the ipsum text as placeholder text for what's going on the page. I'll come up with a user story, which is basically just, a story for how this job came to us and what it's for and the details. I'll invent something. And we'll tackle actual, development of a static web page. with responsive web design. And after we finish that, we'll handle JavaScript for some dynamic effect. Or, well, not exactly dynamic, more interactive, though. And, yeah. That'll handle our front-end web development. I mean, there will probably be quite a few sessions on JavaScript, because JavaScript is a very... I'm not going to say it's complex, because I don't want it to sound intimidating, because it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be intimidating. It can be, especially to new coders who aren't really sure how it's pulling off the things or how they're supposed to go about implementing it. And there's kind of this notion of an aha moment where at some point it all clicks and you just get it. I don't feel like the aha moment is necessary if we can just find a better way to explain it. So my attempt will be to explain what's going on in a way that just makes sense from the beginning, and you won't have to rely on having some magical moment where it all just clicks in your brain. Alright? So, if that all sounds interesting, be sure to join us next week. We do this every Wednesday, about this same time. We've been running for about 3 hours, so that should give you an idea of when we start. Sometimes we run longer than 3 hours, sometimes we run shorter than 3 hours, but it's usually right about this time. If that's what you're into, join us then. Otherwise, the rest of the week we're playing video games. Like I said, we're continuing our playthrough the Metroid series tomorrow, with picking up where we left off on Super Metroid. Friday, we're finishing up Breath of the Wild. We've still got to finish the Hyrule Compendium. That's where we're at with that one. I know Knitting Link wants us to do a Star Fragment hunting day, and I might give her a Star Fragment hunting day, but like we got to finish the compendium first. We're gonna do that first. Saturday, if I'm feeling up to it. I have been feeling a little under the weather lately, so we're kind of just seeing how it goes. Another public horror, or another public domain horror movie. Don't know what we're gonna watch, but I'll find something. Assuming I'm broadcasting that night. That'll be the usual midnight my time. You'll have to check the schedule to see what time that is where you're at in the world. And then, let's see, yesterday we didn't record a podcast. I was feeling under the weather. Next week, Zeph and I will be talking about, on Tuesday next week, we'll be talking about, PsyOps. Ways in which the government has, conducted psychological warfare, either with adversaries abroad or sometimes with their own citizens. Dun dun dun. However, Monday of next week, Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. Hopefully we're finishing it up. We've got 13 more Metroids to hunt down. I'm going to try to get through at least half of those. We might get through all of them, depending upon how easy it goes. We've been progressing quite well through that one. But yeah, that's everything that's coming up on the channel. Not exactly in the proper order, but that's what's coming up. As I said, though, I've got to go get me some lunch. Hope you all learned something here in all of this. If not, tune in next week. Maybe you'll learn something then. Till then, have yourselves a great one. Where's my mouse? There it is.